So one of the main themes of that video is about what design can do for you. And I think sometimes we think about design in the purely sort of art and architecture, but really what you were trying to do in Cape Town was transform design into connecting people and building bridges, which I just think is so exciting. And that principle of civic engagement being at the root of what you were doing, I think is fascinating. Can you give us a concrete example of some of the projects that you were able to create through this, by having this designation?
One of the critical things that we really, I think, was one of the successful projects that we did through World Design Capital, is to be able to place design, which up until then was seen as a parallel sector that was not quite contributing to the economy as much as the other so-called priority sectors, such as oil and gas, et cetera, et cetera. So what we did through World Design Capital, we were able then to take design and place it at the center of the local authority in terms of how it devolves its budget, how it plans its projects, how it's able to see design as a starting point rather than the end of the process. And so there was a program within the local authority that was set up with almost like a CEO of design who was placed there to advise the mayor on all things that were design related. In addition to that, the council budget for each of the local authority areas was then structured in such a way that design was at the core of that budget. So in each of the local authority, smaller authority districts, local authority districts, you'll find that when they talk about what they need to do, whether it's a building or school or a bridge, et cetera, they will think in terms of solving a problem in a way that is design related rather than just let's put a bridge because that's what we need to do. So it became quite a very central point. The other thing, of course, which was a major achievement is that we have really very well-renowned universities in Cape Town, but we were producing this talent that was leaving the city, either going to other cities in South Africa or other cities in other parts of the world, because they also, there was this perception that you don't live in Cape Town as a young professional because it's an expensive city to live in, and secondly, it's not a city that embraces you as a young professional. So you needed to make your money somewhere else in order to come back and live in Cape Town. So we've reversed that trend, and now we see a lot more entrepreneurial, creative businesses springing up. We actually have a creative app that Cape Town Partnership drives, which allows us to be able, through Google, to figure out who's in the city creatively, where they're located as businesses, how can we then showcase them in that app, so that if you are visiting Cape Town, you download the app, you can then see where all the creativity is happening within the city. But what it does also, it allows for the city the creatives in the city to be able to connect with each other.
That's great. When I remember we had a Skype chat a few months ago, and you were telling me about a design storming session that you led in one of the communities around, I think it was around sanitation, right?
Yes. Yeah,
does anyone know, has anyone participated in design storming before? Does people know what this is? I think some of the Smallify session folks who were here earlier in the plenary breakout have participated in an ideation similar, but tell us a little bit about the design storming.
So design storming, another project that was quite successful for World Design Capital. Basically what you do, you put out a statement which comes from a problem that has been identified by a local community. In this case, it was sanitation, provision of safe toilets within a shanty town, if you like. We call them shack areas, where the provision of sanitation is not that easy. So a community was selected. Members of the community, about 10 of them, were put together as a team to contextualize the problem. Then designers, who are renowned designers from all over the city, were invited into a design storming session. So they were put together with the community as designers, together with, in fact, the members of the public who were responsible for the execution of the project once the solution had been crafted. And over a 2-day period, they sat together in one room, trashing out and storming an answer or a solution to the problem through design. And once that problem was solved, The IPO that came out of that design study became an open IPO, which other cities also can use and other areas within the metro can use. The project is then taken into the local authority and is implemented by the local authority as a pilot project, on the basis of which it can then be rolled out.
So that's taking design, community-based design, through a process to solve a local solution based on their needs that then got funded by City Hall and implemented.
Absolutely.
And then potentially to scale up to other places around the metro region and beyond, or?
Yes, potentially.
Potentially.
What that does is that instead of having this very conflictual conversation between the community, the public sector, and the designers that usually are spectators in that dialogue, you have all three sitting around the table. And so there's a co-creation of the solution and also a co-ownership of the outcome, which makes things a little bit more easier.
Excellent. As we all know, South Africa hosted the World Cup in 2010. And then you had this major event in 2014. Tell us a little bit about your reflections of these two major global, granted, let's be real, the World Cup is a little bit more higher profile than World Design Capital, no, no distraction to you. But do you think that, first of all, have everyday Cape Townians benefited from these, from World Design Capital? It sounds like definitely through the example you just said, but sort of compare and contrast these two global events from the everyday Cape Townian perspective.
There's something about having a global event that is really fundamentally quite powerful at a local level. Because what happens is when you're starting with a global event, preparing for it, there's competition. Literally in the system, whether it's city competition or departmental competition. The closer you get to the deadline, you move to collaboration, because there's a sense of collective embarrassment globally if this thing that doesn't really pull through. So we saw it with World Design Capital, we saw it with the World Cup. In fact, the reason we decided to bid for World Design Capital is that we realized that the World Cup allowed us to break down the silos from national government, provincial government to local authority, and within the local authority and between public and private. And so those silos allowed us to be really quite innovative in the way we approached our normal day-to-day business. Yes, of course, Cape Townians benefited. Depends, of course, on who you speak to, because some of them are still quite annoyed by the fact that our stadiums are not being used as frequently as they should be. They're not as bad as Brazil, thank God, at this stage. World Design Capital, I think we're going to see, we've always understood that it's not an event that can have significant impact immediately. It's a start of a long-term journey. It happened for us when we're celebrating 20 years of democracy in South Africa, when the dream, which was the dream under Mandela, was starting to actually fade in terms of our own impatience with the change in the system. And so we had World Design Capital as we're celebrating 2 decades of democracy. And also we were able to use World Design Capital to be able to say, can we reflect on what these 2 decades of democracy have brought for us? And what the next 2 decades of democracy need to be. And so it's always been a start to a long-term journey.
Yeah, and that speaks to leadership, I think one of the main themes that we've been talking about. So let's turn to that, because the last time I saw you was in June in New York City, so relatively recently. And we shared a coffee at the World Cities Conference, and you shared with me the journey that you went on with the World Design Capital, from this baby that you and your organization basically created with the community, and then what you faced with the political reality of new leadership in Cape Town when it came to implement this. And I think that's probably something that everyone in this room knows, that you can create an idea and then sometimes you run into a barrier when it doesn't go the way you want, or your leadership doesn't support you in the execution. So we had this great session on leadership, leveraging your leadership yesterday. And so just curious if you can share a little bit about what the situation was in Cape Town, and maybe any light bulbs that went off yesterday as you were going through that session.
It was very interesting, actually. When we bid for World Design Capital, the International Societies of Industrial Design, which is ICSID, which is the entity that designates the designation, It invited many other cities in Africa to bid for World Design Capital and received absolutely no response, including in South Africa. Mainly because we're preparing for the World Cup. It's not as well known as a designation, and design is when you are actually faced with lack of water, and basic services, is the last thing that you think of as an event within a city. So they came to Cape Town. They asked the mayor if they were interested. In fact, at the time, Seoul was just picking up the mantle of being well-designed capital just before Helsinki, and the one after Cape Town now is Taipei. There was no response from the mayor's office because the mayor was just so overwhelmed with the stadia and the building infrastructure, sort of that. They came to me as the CEO of the Cape Town Partnership to ask for assistance to get access to the mayor's office. And so when I looked at it, because we were running a Creative Cape Town program, I said, well, this is something that we can do well. So I went into the mayor's office and said, listen, I won't ask for anything except for you to say, yes, we can. And so he agreed, because, I only had 15 minutes with him, and there was a long agenda, and this was like something that he doesn't really. So I agreed. So I went away and put together a team. We then bid for World Design Capital. It was a fantastic build, very publicly done, with less resources and more active citizenry as part of the campaign. So we campaigned publicly. We got the citizens of Cape Town, general Cape Townian, to be so excited about it. We opened it up. It doesn't matter whether you are a consumer of design, a producer of design, a designer yourself. This is for you as a Cape Townian, so take pride in it. And that message was really powerful. So we became World Design Capital, and we were shortlisted actually with Bilbao and Dublin. So we met with the team from Bilbao in Taipei when we were designated. In any case, what then happened is that we had a political change.
An election?
An election, local government election. So we changed mayors just a month after we had been announced as World Design Capital. And then what happens with the current mayor, she saw it and she understood the importance of it, but she wanted to run it internally. So she pulled the project from being an externally run project, collaboratively run between public and private, and placed it within a bureaucratic system of local government, which, when we were talking yesterday about the leadership, those qualities really are tested under that. Because one of the things that I was really very worried about is that we put out the campaign, and we, in fact, made a promise to the citizens of Cape Town, and it was clear we were not going to be able to keep that, because we couldn't guarantee the outcome. We understood that 2 years is a very short period of time to prepare for such a world event. World Design Capital is not a weekly or monthly event. It's a year-long program. And so you needed to be quite adept, and it needed to be run quite in a very open way. You can't control it. And so I had to dig deep within myself. And when Mayor Antonio was talking at the beginning of the session and talking about it's not personal, that is something that I had to really grapple with, because it felt very personal at that time. But then you have to go beyond that and understand that it's bigger than you. Secondly, the complexity of having a team of people who've been for close to 12 months living, breathing, and really sacrifices their own family time to bring this together. I had to deal with them and be able to make sure that the trauma of losing this was really was mitigated from my part. Secondly, I had to deal with my own board, which felt that this really needed to be felt. One of the things I was saying to my board members is that you cannot ever be in a position to name, shame, and blame your partners in public and think that you're going to go to the table and have a conversation with them. And so we had to keep quiet and be able to really understand that this was not the war. It was just a skirmish in a bigger terrain. And so that took a lot of resources and a lot of management.
And it was a success.
Well, we're still standing. and the current mayor is a good friend.